Back in July, the NBA announced that they were moving the NBA All-Star Game out of North Carolina because of the HB2 law, which is a controversial bill that limits protection of the LGBT community. On Wednesday, the ACC announced they are moving the neutral site conference championships out of the state as well. Here's what Panthers coach Ron Rivera had to say about his thoughts on this yesterday.
People come to the stadium to get away, and I decided that after the 1980 Olympic boycott. I didn't think it was fair. We were using sports as pawns. We weren't happy with the politics in Russia. And what did they do? They were invading Afghanistan. So as far as I'm concerned, sports is sports and politics is politics. You want to talk politics, you want to get involved, so we have the political ring, you want to make change, vote.
Will, you agree with Ron Rivera there?
Yeah, I do agree with Ron Rivera. Now, to some extent, I recognize that politics and sports intermingling, at least on the edges, is unavoidable. It happens. Politics seeps into every aspect of life, no matter where you're looking, pop culture, sports, whatever. But at this point, we've gotten pretty far beyond the messy edges of sports and politics intermingling, Stephen A. What we've gone into is advocacy. What we've gone into is sports entities, sports franchises, players, advocating for positions through the mechanism of sports. And here's why I have a problem with that. It's all cool. Everyone likes it, as long as you agree with it. And then, oh boy, the game changes. Everyone can root on a player or a team or the NCAA or the NBA doing something as long as it's on their side. Now, it reflects this larger problem we have, by the way, where everyone only wants to hear people that agree with them. They can't expose themselves potentially to the idea that they could be wrong. And by the way, when I look at people like that, I see lazy, I see sloppy, I see easy win. It's not just win like, oh, debate, cheap wins and losses. It's like easy persuasion to my side. If I have a position, if I can counter someone, and by the way, Stephen A., just to say, you're not one of these people. Consistently subjected his views to scrutiny, to rebuttal. It makes your argument better, makes your position better, makes you better. But now we're in this world where everyone agrees all the time, only wants to hear from people they agree with. And here's how this comes back to the NCAA and the NBA. You get into an idea where anyone that disagrees with you, well, they can't have a legitimate point, and they can't simply even be wrong. They got to be evil. They got to be bigots. They got to be racists. They got to be awful human beings, because otherwise they'd be on my side. Clearly, right? That's what everybody thinks. So now when I see the NCAA or the NBA or anyone taking political positions, what they've done is they've ignored the potential for real disagreement. And by the way, most athletes, most sports entities are completely unqualified to have informed opinions on any of these debates, much less recognize intelligent disagreement. So this is my problem with it. It reduces us into good guys versus bad guys. Let's advocate for the good guy's side, and it all works as long as you think you're on the good guy's side.
Well, first of all, let me say a couple of things. And I know we're debating on this show. Let me say something to you personally, Will. There is very little that you say that I agree with. But I love having you on this show. I love having you on the show today. I think you're doing a phenomenal job. I'm proud of the job that you're doing here, filling in for Max today. And you're always welcomed on this show.
Thank you.
And I sincerely mean that, because the fact of the matter is, you're right when you talk about how people react to opinions that are different than their own. And you made that point on Twitter over a week ago. You were absolutely right about that. I don't think that your opinions that are different than mine make you evil. I don't think it makes you bad. I certainly don't think it makes you a racist or a bigot. I think it makes you who you are, which is a person with your views who comes from a different culture, a different background than me, and you don't view it the same way, which you have every right to do. I want to make sure that I'm very, very clear about that. But here's where I would say to you, I disagree with you as it pertains to Ron Rivera, and talking about sports and politics don't mix. It absolutely does mix. It might be oil and water, but it's the kind of oil and water combination that you better find a way to make it a syrup or something. I don't know what the hell it could ultimately turn into, but you better find a way to do it, because we as a society has spent far too much time intermingling it by putting an added amount of pressure on the athletes to be more than just athletes when it serves other folks' purpose. But then we want them to shut up when it serves theirs. It doesn't work that way because you know me well enough to know I'm about fairness. When we talk about Jackie Robinson integrating baseball, yes, he integrated baseball, but wasn't that about integration? That wasn't just about sports. It was about integration. And it was about getting ourselves and elevating ourselves as a society to a point where we became integrated and we accepted people who looked differently and were different than us, and understanding that we were aspiring as a nation to be a gorgeous mosaic. And it's what we all should be advocates of. The civil rights movement and legislation. No, that didn't involve sports, but to the degree it did. Because Jim Brown, with Muhammad Ali, with Bill Russell, with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lou Alcindor at the time, or the list goes on and on. Those people, they were sports figures. But if they did not take the positions that they took, it may not have compelled society to pay attention, take notice, and feel compelled to act. Curt Flood, free agency, okay, that had an impact. Even though it was sports, it spoke to a bigger issue, and teams not having the right to own you just because they drafted you and completely control you. Spencer Haywood coming out of high school and wanting to be in the ABA and then coming to the NBA and having to challenge the authority of the NBA to keep him restricted to the confines they wanted him restricted to. That spoke to bigger issues. So when we think about the bevy of issues that have permeated our society through the prism of sports, we have to understand it's not about sports. It's about life, American life, life in our society. Sports figures are just those, those figures that are illuminated before us. Why? Because we point at them the money that they've earned, the money generated by sports, especially in this day and age, and we have compelled them to be more than just athletes. We want you to be model citizens. We want you to be pitchmen. We want you to be the kind of individuals that go to somebody's home on Thanksgiving or go to somebody's home on Christmas, the kind of person who's welcoming, the kind of person who's inviting. Think about society and how we've evolved. Think about gay rights. Think about the immigration issue. Think about a bevy of other things that have taken place in our society and how we've used sports to basically ingratiate those issues into the fabric of American culture. It may not have been successful, Will, had we not pulled that off. And that's where I disagree with Ron Rivera. Go ahead.
With Ron Rivera, but with you, I don't wholeheartedly disagree. Sports has been a catalyst for many great social changes. You have to understand, although you and I might be on the same side on many of what those social changes were, maybe all of them, perhaps there's people who aren't, right? Perhaps there are people that disagree with it. And all I'm saying on this is what you risk at some point is you take official positions. By the way, we're not just talking about the quiet dignity of Jackie Robinson here. We're talking about overt political positions, right? Here's where this league stands on this bill. And by the way, for the record, no one knows where I stand on these bills. By the way, I left politics. You've referenced it several times to come over here and talk to sports, but sometimes I feel like I'm the only one. I feel like everyone wants to be a frustrated political pundit at every action. I can promise you this.
That's right.
I can promise
You're right about that.
Sports is better. So don't go over there because it's not everything you think it's cracked up to be. It's not enlightening. It's not even entertaining, much less is it helping the conversation. This sports conversation is better in almost every single way.
Oh, I agree with
But just on this point, if sports is insistent on being overtly politically active, you're just going to be reminded at some point you're also a business. And there are people who don't want, I'm not talking about any particular thing. I'm not talking about Kaepernick. I'm not talking, but there are people who don't want their politics and sports mixed, and there'll be a market for those people. There'll be a market for you to turn and find just sports as an escape.
But the problem with it, Will, is this. Those same people then want to turn around and dictate what they do want you to get involved.
No, that's right. That's right. Like I said, it's always if you agree with it. Always if you agree.
I'm just saying, the point that I'm trying to make is that if you're going, I would support that stance by Ron Rivera and yourself. If nobody bothered the athlete about anything other than playing and going home.
And that's impossible.
But when you want to bother them about other things, you then can't turn around and try to say, well, this doesn't belong in sports. Because there's a lot of things that athletes would prefer they didn't have to deal with, but they're compelled to by virtue of the fact that the money that they're making, they're considered role models, et cetera, et cetera. You can't have it both ways. You either got to let them in
Yeah.
or not.
It's Pandora's box.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree.
And to your point
All right.
earlier, whether we like it or not, it is a business at the end of the day, and comes down to the bottom line. People don't want
It's a
that
business.
affected. Yep. Coming up next, Stephen A's boy, the Italian stallion, Jimmy G. He's looking for an encore performance. I'm watching
Lord.
Stephen A's face right now
my
after
goodness.
beating the Cardinals in the desert last Sunday. But will the Dolphins get the best of the Pats quarterback? This is going to be good. Find out. Jimmy G off to a flying start after one game for the Patriots. He upset the Cardinals. A lot of people didn't think he'd win that one. His numbers in one game are better than Tom Brady's stats through the first 2 games in his career. How about them apples? Jimmy Garoppolo, as Stephen A calls him, completed one last pass, has a higher completion percentage, higher passing yards, and more touchdowns. That was without Rob Gronkowski. Will Kane, what do you expect from the Italian stallion?
Please, can we not compare him to Brady? Please, not yet. I expect this. 4 quarterbacks made their first start this past weekend. Garoppolo, Wentz, Prescott, Simeon. I think 3 of them, and Jimmy G being among them, the bloom will fall off the rose. There was an article this week up on The Ringer showing that everyone dinked and dunked the first week away. Every one of the passes were like 6 yards in the air. Some of them as short as 4 when it comes to Trevor Simeon. That's going to end. These players, as soon as defenses get a little more complex with these first-year starters, 3 of them are going to tail off, and Jimmy G is going to be one of them. The Dolphins are a team that people are sleeping on a lot. I think like the Vikings, that defense holding the Seahawks in Seattle to 12 points. I am looking forward to see that Dolphins defense against Jimmy G. By the way, just so I don't leave you guessing, Stephen A., that one quarterback that's not going to turn, it's not going to wilt, that's Dak Prescott. It's just going to get sweeter as the season goes.
So are you picking? What are you picking? You pick,
Dolphins.
What do you think is going to happen? The Dolphins going to win this game?
Dolphins going to win the game. Yes.
You know, listen, first of all, a couple of things. When you rock back and forth the way that you do in that chair,
I like
it just
you watching
shows
me.
how it just shows how nervous you are. And listen, we're just talking sports here. Will, there's no reason to get nervous. I mean, don't panic. All I'm going to do is expose you for being wrong. That's all I'm going to do. There's no harm that's going to come to you. It's the United States of America. You're free to be wrong, which you are all the time. And this is the latest example. This is the latest example because here's the reality. Did you see the Miami Dolphins offense last week?
I did.
Now, I understand it was against Seattle. I understand it was against the Legion of Boom, but the bottom line is they've looked that way no matter who they've gone up against. Ryan Tannehill only threw for 186 yards. Arian Foster's their new running back. My brother, I love Arian Foster. But the guy only ran for 38 yards. Jarvis Landry had 10 receptions, but they were for 59 yards. I mean, the Miami Dolphins, their offense has looked discombobulated all through training camp, through preseason, and now into the regular season. I have no faith in them yet. I think Gase is the right man. I think he'll do a good job for them. But I think that what we're trying to find out and discover here is how valuable and real and legitimate Ryan Tannehill is because he got the $95 million deal. Let's face reality, people in South Beach don't believe in him. He looks the part, you know, handsome man, good-looking wife, seems like a family-oriented dude, really decent dude, looks like South Beach, got the nice tan, kind of tan Will Kane would have if he wasn't in Bristol all the damn time, if he was down in South Beach. But that adds absolutely, just like it has no substance to your argument, it adds no substance to his game. So in the end, what it comes down to, Will Kane, is that Ryan Tannehill and that Miami Dolphins offense, it's not going to be good enough. You look at Jimmy Garoppolo, not Jimmy G, Jimmy Garoppolo. It's really not that. I mean, it was an impressive performance, but 264 yards, a tad bit above pedestrian. He's working under the system of Bill Belichick. He'll be just fine. They'll run the ball with LeGarrette Blount. He'll feed dudes like Martellus Bennett and Edelman and those boys, and they'll do enough to win this game against an improved Miami Dolphins defense. But just like defense wins championships, points win games. And Miami ain't going to win too many of them because I don't expect them to score much. I think New England wins this game something along the lines of 23-14.
Well, the odds on Stephen A. complimenting Ryan Tannehill's looks over Jimmy G's were low. Like that that was not the
Jimmy
shot
G's a
you
good-looking
expected.
guy.
That's what
I mean,
everybody's saying all
I'm not
week,
in
right?
the business of I'm not in the business of complimenting how men look.
You just did.
I don't roll like that. That's just not my style. But if you're a handsome dude, I got to give you credit where credit is due. I look at Tom Brady. I'm telling you right now, I see some of his outfits. I'm like, damn, I got to get one of those. I got to get that blazer. I got to get that suit. I mean, if you got it, you got it. I got to give you props. You understand? But that's all it is.
Just giving credit where credit's due. We appreciate that.